prominent African personalities to go to Kenya and mediate following the disputed presidential elections. In the month following the elections, 1,500 people were killed by rival factions, and about 300,000 Kenyans were displaced and uprooted from their homes. The country was on the brink, and the media was starting to compare what was happening in Kenya with Rwanda, because Kenya has 42 different tribes, and there was tribal content to some of the violence. But in this case, the international community acted with speed and in concert. The elections were end of December, and I was asked to go in early January. And by the time I was approached, several people had gone. Archbishop Desmond Tutu had been in. There were 4 former African heads of states: President Chisano of Mozambique, President Nkapa of Tanzania, President Masiri of Botswana, and President Kaunda of Zambia were on the ground trying to do something. I was due to get there on the 15th, but on the way to the airport I felt sick and ended up in hospital for a week. And in a way I was able to use that week well to build a coalition and build support amongst the international community before I got in. Although the media were cynical, saying the man we were waiting to help has conveniently fallen sick. But it wasn't really, I had about 40-degree temperature. Anyway, I did get there on the 22nd of January and started our work. I also assured the people of Kenya, for I met with the civil society, the business community, the churches, the women's groups, and you, that this is your country. You should be concerned about what has happened. And the agreement we are going to reach will be your agreement. And you have to work to make sure it is implemented. And that we will run an open process. Each agreement we sign in private, we will release and make it public. And that is what we did. But what was important is that it was an African Union mandate, but we got the support of the European Union very strongly, the US, the United Nations, and we all worked in concert and spoke with one word. And I got the support I needed from everyone, and the African Union was also very, very active. We managed to bring the crisis to a resolve. We resolved the crisis in 2 months. By end of February, we had signed an agreement which led to the formation of the coalition government. And that is still holding. The 2 leaders are working well together. And of course, they have also undertaken to bring about serious reform of the electoral process, of the constitution, land reform, and they would also set up Truth and Reconciliation Commission, in addition to a committee to look into the elections, whose report came out last month, and another report on the violence and who incited who to riot or to commit crimes will come out next month. And here I must say I want to pay a tribute to another compatriot of yours, Hans Corell, who joined me at a critical stage during the negotiations when we were looking for a legal solution to a thorny problem which had been raised. Because as part of the agreement we had to create the post of a prime minister. And because of the mistrust between the 2 parties, the opposition had indicated they would never accept a solution if the post of prime minister is not enshrined in the constitution. So in 2002, the same 2 men, Kibaki and Odinga, had been partners. And Odinga had been promised the post of a prime minister. After the elections, the president reneged on that, and that position was never created, and he never became prime minister. So this time they were determined that if the establishment of a prime minister's post is going to be part of the agreement, then it has to be embedded in the constitution. And at the negotiating table, representative, the team leader on the government side, saying, out of the question. Everything you do must be within the law. Must be within the, not within the law, must be within the current constitution. So I asked her, you're saying everything we do must be legal, must be within the law, or within the current constitution? She said within the current constitution, which means you can't touch it. You can't create the post of the Prime Minister because it's not provided for in the constitution. And that's when Hans came in to help us try and sort out how we can create the post without opening up the entire constitution, but finding a neat way of amending the constitution and moving forward. In the end, we did create the post of the Prime Minister, and it did not lead to a civilian coup, as the team leader on the other side was saying. But many today refer to the Kenyan process as perhaps the first successful application of the responsibility to protect, in that the international community moved early, they reacted quickly, they did not use force but used all diplomatic, political and economic pressure to get an agreement. And I think this is an interesting development. So it is clear, and Anna would agree if she were here, that we are moving in the right direction. There is no doubt that in legal and institutional terms, we are better placed to act collectively to help protect human rights. But of course, the real test is whether these tribunals, bodies, and normative commitments are working in practice and applied consistently. And unfortunately, here the record of the international community has been mixed at best. Today we continue to see gross and systematic human rights violations in too many parts of the world. And we continue to see too many situations where the international community is failing to live up to its responsibilities. The response to Darfur provides us a stark example of the failure of the international community. More than 1 year on from the UN Security Council Resolution 1769, which authorized the deployment of Darfur peacekeeping mission, the joint UN African Union force remains short of troops, equipment, most critically, helicopters so needed to carry out its work. Darfur is the size of France. We don't have enough troops, and you will never to flood the territory. You have to make up the shortage of troops with mobility, with helicopters, with APCs and all that. But the troops don't have them. A report published this summer discovered that of the 18 helicopters required by the force, not a single one has been delivered. Despite the fact that more than 20 countries have surplus helicopters and aircraft that can be used for the operation. The consequences were described by the force commander of the mission, General Martin Lund. Martin, he's Nigerian, but he has a nice Swedish name, Martin Luther. He said, we were sent to the boxing ring with our hands tied behind us. And in effect, this is what his situation is. Some question whether justice should be sacrificed in the interest of peace. But we have seen in Sierra Leone and in the Balkans that on the contrary, justice is a fundamental component of peace. Indeed, justice has often been bolstered by lasting peace.